Hello, everyone, and welcome to Radio Socialist Olympia, the podcast of the Olympia Democratic Socialists of America. I'm Corey.
And I'm Isaac.
For folks who maybe aren't regular listeners, our last few episodes have been part of a political education series highlighting the histories of and differences between liberalism and socialism. Today, though, we're taking a bit of a break from theory to talk about a current working class struggle that's going on here in our community, that of our local Starbucks workers who are trying to win a union.
The first location in Olympia to try and unionize is the Cooper Point store in the Westside, but there's now another Starbucks trying to unionize in Tumwater. Some of you may have been following this story for a while, but for those who haven't been, this campaign kicked off after 3 Starbucks locations in Buffalo, New York, voted to unionize back in December, attracting national news coverage. This triggered something of a domino effect as workers at more than 200 stores across the country have since filed for union elections. At least 24 stores and 3 roasteries have won their elections with only 1 loss.
This is not the first time that Starbucks workers have tried to unionize. They actually won a union back in 1984, when Starbucks only had a handful of locations in Seattle. Unfortunately, when Howard Schultz bought the company in 1987, he immediately sought to break this union by running a decertification campaign. This is when 30% of workers signed a petition saying they want to revoke a union's right to bargain on their behalf. This can be done sometimes when union workers want to switch unions, but often it's used by management to break unions. Apparently for Schultz, a union didn't fit into his plan for Starbucks. Roastery and Warehouse Workers Union lasted a few more years, but eventually was decertified in 1992. Over the last 30 years, the only Starbucks workers with a union have been ones who work for other businesses, such as an in-store Starbucks kiosk at a unionized grocery store. This is a big deal because the food service industry has been one of the hardest industries to unionize. It is predominantly low wage and high turnover, not ideal conditions for convincing workers to stick it out and fight for better pay and working conditions. COVID has changed everything. Demands for PPE and other safeguards brought workers together. The so-called Great Resignation has given workers more leverage to demand better pay. And of course, Starbucks has made things worse for itself by cutting back worker hours, even as it bragged publicly about raising wages. Every store that unionizes builds momentum for the movement, and gives workers at other stores the courage to fight for their own union election. It also allows organizers to refine their method, to figure out what works and what doesn't. Now that we've given the background, let's introduce our guests.
I'm Billie. I've worked with Starbucks for a little over 3 years.
I'm Nora. I'm an Aries. I worked with Starbucks for just about a year now. I've been working with Billie for a year too.
We're best friends, truly.
We're like unnecessary details.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add the Aries part so bad.
No, I'm mad. I'm a Capricorn.
So what was it that made you decide that you wanted to start a union at the Westside Starbucks?
So we started organizing with one of our other friends, and we would, after work every day, we would just hang out outside of work and just complain about the day for, hours. And we would do that almost every day. And at a point, I said, well, okay, this is going nowhere. We come out here and we do this every day. We should just, transfer. She said, well, if we transfer, it's probably going to be the same elsewhere. And I said, we should quit. And she goes, well, I like working for Starbucks. And then I said, well, what if we unionized? And, we had been seeing what the stores in Buffalo had accomplished and kind of realized that everybody was, experiencing the same stuff and had a lot of the same complaints and grievances. And it just seemed like the natural next step to trying to change working conditions and better our experience with this company.
Billie rolled through the drive-thru and told me that we were unionizing. And so now I'm on the committee.
We're doing it.
Is this sort of like the get-in loser meme?
I was literally pulled in the drive-thru, get in loser, we're unionizing.
I almost fell out of the drive-thru window because she kept whispering, we're unionizing. And I was like, what? And then I kind of leaned out the window and had my legs up in the air on the other side. And she whispered it in my ear. And I was like, oh, God damn it. And so I was after that, I was now I gotta put work in to make this a better situation for everyone. And so, yeah, it was kind of it was a get in loser moment for sure.
You actually had 2 follow-ups for that, which is what made you decide that it was worth staying to fight it out, and then how you respond to the critics who say, oh, you don't like your boss, just get a different boss, get a different job.
Well, I feel like there's Starbucks is unlike other companies in a lot of ways, and so it's I don't think that there isn't something to fight for with Starbucks. I think that as much as it is run by a guy who's very anti-union and everything, it's the people that they hire and the general I hate to say vibe, but what Starbucks has is not like a lot of other places, and so it has a really good basis and it has a really good group of people, and I think that they hired a bunch of like cool like queer alt kids and then didn't expect us to want to unionize. And so it's like, you can't put us in this place with a bunch of really great people and really like forward thinking people with access to an education and not expect us to go that route.
Yeah. Isaac, what's that quote about capitalism being like the architects of its own destruction?
Oh yeah, capitalism creates its own gravediggers.
Truly.
That's the
It's like you hire. It's like, I mean, we're gonna see it this entire month coming up of companies, exploiting and pandering to queer people. And this time, they said, "Okay, let's get organized, gays. Let's fight for something." I mean, it does make sense that like a company that, I'm not going to say targets, but definitely targets queer people and say, hey, gay, work for us. It just, these are people who have, like, for a lot of people, lifelong experiences of being, like, marginalized and, like, having to fight for themselves and fight to be heard or recognized or, just...
It's mad niche. It's
very niche. So it just is like, are you really surprised that a bunch of, like, gay people and trans people and brown people were like, hey, recognize us?
You like can't use us to facilitate your agenda and then expect us to not
like using us as like a prop to like look good to their like leftist like stockholders and like, look, we're so and stuff.
There's another good meme that's like the list of like all the evil corporations from ever, but it's like with the rainbow logo, like Rainbow Wayland Yutani, Wayland, or like Rainbow
Umbrella Corporation.
Yeah, Rainbow Shinra from Final Fantasy, and it's like
I keep seeing this meme on the internet of like basically like straight white men going, yes, hunty, slay, mama, snatch that wig.
No, yeah. You could literally imagine Howard Schultz being like, slay.
Oh, that thought
Period.
that thought makes me cringe.
So could you give us some idea of a timeline here from when you first had the idea to when you first started talking to your coworkers to when you formed an organizing committee, etc.?
We started to discuss seriously unionizing in like January. Then by like early February, we...
Yeah, it was like January 12th or something.
January 12th, we started talking about it. By early February, we had cards, and we were, like, basically going around to all of our workers and being like, hey, come outside. Like, it was very stealthy. It was like...
we got it all done in, like,
come outside on your break. Yeah, we, like, managed to get it out in, like, 2 weeks, and then we filed. Like, from the moment that we got the cards to the moment of filing, it was, like, about a 2-week window.
Any particular tools that you just recommend to, or, like, anybody else who's trying to, like, coordinate?
I feel like a testament to, like, kind of our personalities is Billie's a very, like, get shit done type of person. She made the call. She did all the things. And then, like, when it came down to, like, talking to people, I kind of, like, I'm, like, always smiling. Like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and come to work giggling type of person. And so whenever it came time to, like, talk to the people about it, it was really easy to, like, facilitate sort of, like, who does what and how we're going to get what done. And so if you can, like, find someone... If you, like, talk to people and find out what their, like, kind of powers are, because everyone has an asset and, like, things that they're good at. And so when it came to, like, communicating with people and asking people questions and getting people comfortable talking about things like unions, it was like making sure that they felt like they weren't being pushed to talk about something that they're uncomfortable with, making sure it wasn't on the floor. If it was on the floor, it was with someone who like was obviously very vocal about those types of things. Asking questions like, have you heard about Buffalo? Have you heard about like there's also Seattle, somewhere in Seattle that had
about at the same time.
Yeah, we were doing that stuff. The roastery had just filed.
Yeah, the roastery went public, and so it was like it started getting closer and closer to home. So, and like we're an hour from the roastery, so it was just like, hey, you know what's going on up the street?
Also recognizing when people were like, we had some coworkers, like one of them, her car started on fire, and we were like, her car started on fire, and the first person she called was our boss, and then our boss was like, we're gonna have to find someone to cover your shift. Like, sorry, not sorry, like either get an Uber or find someone to cover your shift. I'm not, And so then we were like, when things like that happened to people, we were like, hey, you didn't deserve that treatment. you know what could maybe put you in a better place, you know, like where you can be taken care of for these types of things, and like not have to worry about like losing your job because like something horrific happened. Like we live in late stage capitalism, bad things are going to happen, it's going to be hard to come back from them. It's reasonable to like need more than we're being given.
So on that note, there's an old adage that every labor organizing campaign relies on, you know, agitating people around a widely felt grievance or set of grievances. Can you talk about what the like issues and complaints that people had about the working conditions that added fuel to this fire of organizing?
So first of all, we had frequently dealt with issues like we get paid like you starting wage is $15 an hour, and you get like, there was a point in time where I got like 8 hours a week, and I got anywhere between 8 and like 16. On a really, really lucky week, I'd get 20. And this was like, they were hiring for full-time and part-time. And so it's like, even if they hired you a part-time position, they were like, what kind of hours are you looking for? And I was like, 35, 30 maybe. And they were like, oh yeah, okay. And so like you accept the job being like, oh, okay, I think they understand what I'm looking for here. And then they're like 8 hours, and you're like, oh my God. There's a lot of people who are like, and they also kind of make you feel like if you have another job or if you prioritize another job, that they're going to mess with your hours, they're going to change everything up about it. There are people who like have children, and it's like they felt stressed out because if their child got sick, they're using their own sick time. It didn't, like, they're not catering to people who are parents, and like a lot of people are parents, and like even right now we're dealing with like a lot of crises in America that are like around that, and so it's not like we have a lot of room to feel secure around parenthood anyway. And so it's just like this whole plethora of stuff that's just like, oh, you need like 17 hours minimum to get the benefits, and I had like at max 16 hours. And so there's just so many things. Oh, we would have low staffing. Our boss would be there, but she would be in the back like a majority of the time, and so it'd be like we wouldn't get help we needed. People would feel bad for asking for help.
Yeah.
You think of anything else?
Just the simple fact that, like, when you think about the nuances of all of those things you just mentioned, like looking at the cost of living just in Thurston County, like $15 an hour at maybe 20 hours a week, that's not going to cut it. And then to go back to the thing about, like, yeah, you can't even get the health benefit, and like Howard Schultz will brag about the benefits and be like, oh, you get this and you get that, and you get the tuition reimbursement thing. But nationwide, all of our hours have been cut. So it's like, oh, look at these great benefits. But even our supervisors aren't working enough hours to get those benefits. Like, you would think if you're like a supervisor, you would be working 40 hours a week. Even supervisors were working maybe like less than 30.
Well, and like to speak to some of the things that like our coworkers are going through without too much like without being too specific. One of our coworkers and good friends has a child, and she is getting insurance through Starbucks, and she was paying like $600 a month for insurance. And so if you're working like 15 hours a week, let's say you're working enough to get the insurance, so you're working like 20 hours a week.
She works 22
$15 an hour. If insurance is $600 a month and you're getting like, I don't know, let's say maybe 800, 900, you know. I don't know the math of this.
At like 16, she works 22 hours a week at like $16 and change an hour, so she brings home like $1,200 a month. Yeah, that's like most of her income. And then for me, I get very few hours, and I'm lucky enough to just have one job because I am just not capable of doing much more. I have to have, there's 5 roommates in my house all together, and we have a 3-bedroom house. There's someone living in the living room, and like 2 people living, like 3.5 people living in the living room right now.
It's the avocado toast. If you just stop getting avocado toast.
Yeah. And so it's like, luckily I'm in a situation where it's like, it works for me, and I'm happy in this situation, happy enough. But it's like, no one should have to live like that. Like, no one should have to live like that. And there's even an instance where we were talking to one of our bigger bosses, and he was like, well, at one point I had to work 3 jobs, and I was like, you shouldn't have had to. Like, just in that moment, I was like, I'm not even mad at you for like mentioning that, because it's like you have this weird pride in like grind culture where it's like you should have deserved to have to work 3 jobs to feel like you were worthy. And so I was just like, you shouldn't have had to done that, and like it's really shitty that you had to do that, but can you empathize with us now and recognize that you shouldn't have had to do that, and we shouldn't have to do that either.
With that said, going from there, did you face any resistance from your coworkers? Like, if so, like what kind of, like when you talk to people about unionizing. Because when I was, I used to work for a Verizon call center, and I tried to talk to people off the clock about, like, hey, this really sucks working here, and things might be better if we had a union. And, like, things I ran into was, oh, there's no point, nothing will ever change, Did you run into that? Like, what kind of things did people say of, like, excuses to not participate?
You mentioned it earlier about service jobs having such high turnover, and throughout this entire campaign, we've heard that excuse so often from stores that are still underground and trying to get the numbers so that they can file. Mm-hmm. That, oh, we work with high school students, or, oh, we're like a university town, so it's probably not, and there's just high turnover. And so you get a lot of apathy and just, what do you expect? Adjust your expectations. This is retail. This is the service industry.
There's also people that were like, well, why don't you just call Howard Schultz? I'm sure he'd fix it if you talk to him. Like, you're not talking to him.
Ask nicely.
Yeah,
the amount of times we've been told that. Just ask nicely.
They're like, why do you have to strike? Why do you have to do this, that, and the other? And it's like, it's people, too, that a lot of the time aren't involved in, like, a lot of the process and haven't seen the, like, because, like, we did deal with a little bit of backlash with management, because, like, after the whole union thing started happening, like, around the country, it's like our boss started, like, kind of dropping hours and locking down on certain things. Like, I'd never been dress coded in the whole time I'd been working there. Mm-hmm. And, like, without incriminating myself too much, like, I definitely had, like, I wear skirts a lot.
Nora and I really like wearing mini skirts.
Mm-hmm. And it was never a problem. Like, I've been here almost a year, maybe a little bit longer, and I've been wearing, like, little skirts the whole time. Like, nothing too atrocious, let's be clear.
But enough that our DM would come into work, like, our bosses would come into work all the time.
Pull and even skirts down as much as we could.
Like, beforehand, like, we'd even get compliments from our store manager. Like, you look so cute today. Mm-hmm. Like, 6 months ago, you look so cute today. Now you're out of dress code.
People would get sent to check our, like, skirts and stuff, like we were in, like, school. And, like, school dress codes are a problem enough in themselves, but, like, to be at work and to have someone be like, you're too exposed.
Pulling out a tape measure.
Yeah. It's literally like you're only allowed to have your skirt 4 inches above your knee. And so it's like, at some point, my boss had come, and it was like after things.
That sound you heard was my cat rubbing her head on the microphone. Sorry about that. So any finishing thoughts on, like, the workplace grievances?
So a fun thing happened before we went public, but when it became sort of clear to our supervisor that we were organizing, at one point she cornered me in the back of the store right before I was leaving and was like, hey, how was your day? And, like, we had been going through this song and dance for weeks and weeks and weeks of, hey, how was your day today? It was bad. Why was it bad? Because of X, Y, and Z. Please fix it. Well, maybe I challenge you to fix it yourself. Or, I believe that you can do it. Or, yeah, I hear you.
I see you.
I'm listening. I support you. Bye. And I was just like, at a point, I was just like, I don't want to talk about it anymore, honestly. And it was, once you kind of know that you're organizing, you kind of give up on that. What's it called? That ladder of, like, escalating things to your boss. You stop doing that because you're like, this is a pointless exercise. So if you ask me things about how I feel about work, we don't have anything to talk about because it's not going to go anywhere. And I was just like, it's not important. It doesn't matter. I'm tired of talking about it because you're not going to do anything about these issues. And she was like, I'm so sorry you feel that way. And then I also, like, address the dress coding thing because I'm like, it seems really hypocritical that you're enforcing these policies that have not been previously enforced. Where is this coming from? And more importantly, why are you making other supervisors do it so you don't have to? And I may or may not have called her a spineless coward and a hypocrite to her face. Can't confirm or deny. Either way, I told her that, if she spoke to every single person on the floor, they would agree with me that it's out of control. We're tired. We're frustrated. And you got a big storm coming, honey. And she was like...
Which, mind you, she said verbatim, you got a big storm
coming. This is all verbatim. Honey, you got a big storm coming. And she said... And then I said, bye. And she said, wait. wait, you can't just say, I have a big storm coming and then not explain. What do you mean? And I was like, no comment.
It was like that slip that you're like, oh my god.
Shouldn't have said that.
Everything's going downhill. We're still underground at that point, but like it was like days maybe until
days away.
Like whispers were happening, but
so she's like trying to like pressure me to tell her like, so are you organizing? Like, what's going on? Tell me more. And I'm like, can't say bye. Apparently she cried, called her mother.
It's a very like good boss,
bad boss, sad boss.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely sad boss of like, hey, I was under a great relationship. Why would you guys do this to me? Anyway, you know, this thing happened. And then my very next day that I came to work, I got a corrective action form for your time and attendance.
Nothing to do with what she got. Like, she had been like, they've been trying to get her in trouble for.
See, that sounds like a past practice grievance where, like, suddenly we're all uptight about a rule that nobody ever cared about before, and there was, like, nothing in writing about it.
And that's been happening, like, at least regionally and probably nationally, too. A couple of workers here in the Pacific Northwest will, like, message us and be like, I just got written up for cursing.
Well, and
like what?
Additionally, when Billie had gotten written up, I don't know if it was a write up, right?
Yeah, it was like
They had brought our like DM.
Does DM stand for direct manager?
District manager.
District manager. Okay.
Our star manager brought our district manager in to be a part of, I guess, Billie's punishment, her corrective action, which is like completely out of the blue. We've had partners be fired and they didn't have the DM involved. And so it was super weird for them to bring the district manager in for this occasion. And especially because, like, I mean, we didn't even have write-ups, really. I can't even think of a time that people had been written up. And then not too long after that, another partner had been written up who was, like, another kind of, like, very openly, like...
He never got the write-up.
Oh, didn't get the write-up, but got, like, a very sort of... a way more aggressive kind of slap on the hand than ever was.
And is, like, just most notably, like...
very outspoken,
ungovernable.
I'm not sure, like, we can't even say that he isn't the type to, like, mention the union stuff just to, like, kind of perk up someone's ears. Yeah. So, was very, like, I feel like pointed in the way that the store manager started kind of handling things like that, and then we laid it ULP on them, which is a unfair labor practice lawsuit. We laid it on our store manager, and there's also an ongoing one against the company, and then things pretty much came to a screeching halt. They stopped doing that type of stuff. They started having like more store meetings where they're like, oh, we have really great benefits, we have really good benefits, you don't want to lose your benefits, do you? So.
Did they actually say that, or did they do it in like more indirect terms?
They started putting up paperwork in the back. There was things that were like, they were like, there's gonna be wage freezes, and they could freeze your wages and your benefits, and during like the voting process, and so it was like, which is I feel like intentionally kind of misleading. They're not actually allowed to like freeze your wages. You can go up to your manager and be like, hey, can I have a raise when you're still like filing to unionize? So it's like. They kind of went sideways about telling the truth intentionally to kind of scare people from doing things like that. And I even think that for me, it's like, I'm not really versed in legal jargon. So it's like if someone says they're going to freeze my wages, that immediately like freezes my heart because I'm like, they're not going to pay me.
And that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they can do it. Like Howard Schultz is saying, oh, we're rolling out all these new benefits, but not for those unionized stores though. Like,
which is intentionally misleading because I mean, the union stores just have to, like, verify that it's something we want to be part of. Like,
yeah. Anyone who knows anything about labor rights and unionizing knows that it is illegal for them to actually scale back our benefits or deny us benefits at all.
But for people who are on the fence and maybe don't know as much about unionizing or just early in the stages of it,
or stores that haven't even
scary.
Talked about it,
yeah, it's really scary, and it's, like, very intentional.
And it does kind of feel like it's been 6 months or 5 months, and it definitely feels like as a company our store specifically, our districts and regionally and nationwide, it feels like they have kind of given up on scaring stores that are actively organizing and putting more of their resources into scaring unfiled stores from doing so. And being like, well, those other stores that are already unions, they're a lost cause.
And there was even this video that Howard Schultz put out where he was talking about how there are a lot of people, like 80% or something of people that are working in Starbucks are new partners, and how there are like outside forces that are like manipulating these partners. And so it's like already it was funny watching as someone who's like a big part of the unionizing thing to be like, I'm an outside force? Ooh. Oh my gosh.
Stop,
how
Howard,
mysterious.
You flatter.
But yeah, it was really interesting because in that same video he was like, I guess there was a point where a partner had introduced themselves and they're like, God, my name is this and I use these pronouns, they them pronouns, and then Howard Schultz immediately went up and was like, isn't he a great guy? And like just misgendered them.
Literally like less than a minute into them introducing themselves and Howard getting on stage, he misgenders.
Keeping it classy.
So Nora, you were talking about benefits meetings and the bosses talking about like, suggesting that these benefits could be put at risk if you go for a union. And we know that you had because Olympia DSA showed up to when you were having captive audience meetings. So just for those who don't know, like, what is a captive audience meeting?
So captive audience meetings are like meetings that they hold to kind of talk to you about very specific things, and lead you sort of in the direction, or at least make you think a little bit harder in their direction about how things are functioning. So let's say in this one, they talked a lot about our benefits. And so a lot of the information I was rolling out, like around sort of just the entire union movement, and especially on their side, they're saying things like, oh, well, you might not qualify for the benefits. You might get your benefits frozen. You might, do this, that, or the other might happen if you are unionized. And so, like, there's always a little bit of truth to what they're saying, but they kind of flip it in a really crazy way to make it seem really bad. So it's like, let's say with these new they might be, like, giving raises out to everyone. They're like, well, union members might not be a part of that. And so the reason that is because, A, you might be in a unionized store where they're like, oh, they're raising the minimum wage across the country to $15 an hour. Your store gets $17. Why would you need to be a part of that? Or it'd be something along the lines of like, they might change the benefits for healthcare, and your store needs to go and okay in that and be like, okay, well, is this change to healthcare going to affect what we already have in place? So it's like a lot of the time it's like just communicating it past the people at the store to make sure that it's something that we're all interested in, because we don't want to be like, we don't want our choice to be made for us by corporations. That's the whole point of the union. And so it's like these meetings will do things like, oh, you have all these benefits, quietly in the background. You might lose them. And there's no reason you should be wanting more. And so it just kind of like, I feel like it was meetings to kind of like, in a weird way, put you in your place, remind you that you have good things, why do you want more? It's like if other people have it worse, we have this, though. You have 20 therapy sessions, you have free Spotify, and you're like, I love the idea of 20 therapy sessions. However, that's not even like, that's like once a month, maybe twice a month out of the year, like, every month. And then Spotify, I get hungry and I don't necessarily have Spotify for dinner most nights.
Harry Styles is not in my tummy.
Yeah, I can't eat music.
Like maybe my working conditions shouldn't make me need therapy.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's funny because he's like, in the video, he's talking about how some like egregious amount of people.
Said, I think 75% of Starbucks workers are using the Lyra benefit, the mental health benefit. So it's like, yes, you're also depressed.
Mindfulness workshops don't pay the bills.
Literally.
Well, and it's like, why should you? I mean, I'm like, if 75% of your workers need access to that, do you think that maybe something you're doing could potentially put you in a situation where you're acknowledging that your workplace is causing people enough stress to need therapy?
I went on a deep dive a couple of months ago trying to configure like a survey for our store to like get like a general consensus of the things that our store wanted to bargain for and the things that we wanted. So I went on like this deep dive and fell down a rabbit hole of all of our benefits and like just looking at them and like zooming in on all of them. For example, the child care benefit, we do have a child care benefit, but you only get, I think, 10 last minute babysitters in an entire calendar year. No.
Also, during the pandemic, you had like 2 paid isolation days for per quarter.
It was less than that, I think, because since we started organizing, or when Buffalo started, they were like, oh, you get more isolation, I guess. Like,
well, and the thing with that, too, is that if there was a period in time where if you had any symptoms at all, you were required to go on isolation. So, like, immediately, it was like, if you had maybe a fever or maybe you had, like, chills or something, you know, and you reported that, you were put on isolation. And if you were also in contact with someone, you were put in isolation. And so they almost immediately used up your isolation days because of some, like, trivial thing that had happened. And so you'd be stuck in a situation where you're like, oh my god, I actually got COVID for real, and now I like need to figure out how I'm gonna be gone for 5 days. That's required.
Or if your symptoms continue
past the 5 days.
The 5 days, or even because at the time that one of our organizers got COVID, the isolation was still 10 days. But her symptoms, she has long COVID now. Like, she experiences COVID symptoms every day, and her symptoms surpassed the 10 days, and our boss was just like, you gotta use your sick time, I guess, sorry.
Well, and it's like we work in the food service industry, so it's like there are certain things that like you can't go to work if you threw up in the last 24 hours, if you had a fever in the last 24 hours, if you have like any tummy issues in the last 24 hours, you can't show up to work. And so it's like you're in this position where it's like, well, if you don't show up to work and you let them know what happened, then you either have to use your sick time, or if you don't have sick time, then that's sorry. But then simultaneously, if you don't tell them, you can get fired in the same breath, you know? It's like you really have to choose how you navigate things, and you have to kind of be superhuman to navigate it, because how are you supposed to like control if you get sick? How are you supposed to control any of that?
Which I think, you know, just to like, I think a good surmisation of all of this is just that it is bigger than Starbucks, because, you know, Starbucks is not exclusive or isolated, and like, or even just thinking about like COVID and like the fact that isolation is 5 days now instead of 10, like that's not a Starbucks issue, that's a capitalist issue. And you have these companies that it's literally profit over people, and they just don't care about how you feel, or like if you are disabled or any of those things. They only care about how they can maximize profits. I mean, almost all of us, most of the time, work 4.75 hours every day, because they know that at 5 you have to take a 30-minute lunch. So almost everybody works at most 4.75 hours, because they want to maximize how much labor they can get out of you before they give you a break. And yeah, it's not, I don't think that this is exclusive to Starbucks.
Well, and it's frustrating too, because so let's say that we get like I said, 16 hours a week. So it's like 2 full 8-hour days, but instead of getting 2 full 8-hour days, you get 4 4-hour days. And so it's like you don't even get that freedom that comes with like working fewer hours. You still have to like schedule most of your week around a job that only gives you 4 hours a day. And so it's so frustrating to feel, and it's also so busy. It's like we have these peaks, and this is actually a really good thing to talk about. We have these peaks in the day where it's like, you know, like 9 a.m. to maybe 11 a.m. 7 a.m. to maybe 11 a.m. So it's like a full 4-hour shift. You will be put on the floor, and it's like to give some clarity about the situation, there are multiple different like stations that you can be at. And so there's DTR, which is the station that has the register and it's at the window. So you're helping customers out the window, you're doing cash handling, you're doing customer connections, you're doing you're just like kind of doing a lot of like fiddly things around you. Then there's DTO, and that's where you take the orders from the people that are like out at the little order station, and then you also pack deliveries, and you organize everything for the register at the window. And then there's the warming station, there's the front, there's customer support, there's the 2 bars, there's also additionally cold bar, and I think that's it. And so there's all these stations, and it's like sometimes we'll have like a 3-person play, like on days that maybe someone calls out and also wasn't scheduled very well. We'll have to close down the lobby because we don't have enough people to have a front additionally. So front register. And then there'll also be times where you have to be DTO and DTR. So that means you're taking orders off the headset. You're giving people things out the window. You're also sorting out the things in front of you because there's a million white cups in front of you. And then you are doing cash handling. And then there are times where it's like someone will have made a frap behind you and have forgotten it because they're also slammed. And so you have to go and finish someone's frap. And then you have to like be concerned about the person that's yelling at you because you're not talking to them enough. And then you also will have to run over and do the warming station because there's no one warming. And so it's like this whole like, oh, it's just the worst. And one time someone had our manager up front because we just were slammed, and she was like, you know, where do you want me? And they're like, can you be DTO, DTR? And she was like, ugh. And immediately it was like, oh my God, I said the wrong thing. She was like, oh, I mean, that's fine. Because she recognized that it's like, no one can feasibly do that job while keeping times below like 56 seconds per customer. And so it's like, we'll be like, oh my gosh, we need more hours. We need like more coverage. We need something. And she'll be like, oh, well, you haven't earned it because your times are like above a minute. And so it's like atrocious. And so
when you lay it out like that, you can see just like how much we are sacrificing every day. Like, we're on our feet for the entire 4.5 hours. We are doing all this work, doing all this like manual labor and repetitive labor. Like, I have carpal tunnel, and then having to like manage irate customers who are used to getting their coffee fast. Most of these people don't even want to talk to us. They're just like, give me the coffee. Customer connection, fuck that. I want to go to work. And all of that, and doing all of that, coming into work every day at 4, I was only making $1,000 a month to do all of that. Mm-hmm. I'm homeless. Literally.
Yeah, well, and God, it's just like, it's atrocious. And when people are like, oh, well, you only deserve minimum wage, I'm like,
it's this like weaponization of saying unskilled labor.
Mm-hmm. And then that's not even to mention, they do this atrocious thing where they want you to do floors in the middle of like, you have to do floors in the middle of the day, and doing floors is essentially picking up all the mats, sweeping the area, sweeping behind all the fridges, and then going over and mopping the entire thing. So let's say it's 1 o'clock, it's peak, you're mopping the floors, getting everything up. So like, not only are you in the middle of everyone, you feel awful, it's the most shameful thing in the world. And then there's a slippery floor as people are trying to rush around and do things. So I've seen an ungodly amount of people bust their ass. And it's like, I watched someone go and they slipped and they hit their head so hard their hat fell off. And then they were like, I gotta get up, I gotta keep working, I gotta like, it was like, and it's like sad. It's so heartbreaking to see someone so panicked about like, after they had, oh my God, I was like sitting there and I was like, you need to go in the back. You need to go in the back. You need to go, like, put some ice on your head. You should probably go home. I watched someone have seizures on the floor. I've seen people...
This person just had a seizure last week. Fucking fell on the floor. Was out.
It was horrifying.
And no one said, yeah, go home. They were like, can I go home? No one was like, yeah, get the fuck out of here. Feel better. Bye.
No, and it's like, people will fall in the back. People will, like... It's just, like...
I fell... When we had that big snowstorm, nobody did an incident report, had to fucking escalate that because nobody did the paperwork for it. Mm-hmm. Because, everybody's stressed. And
hey, at least they're not like handing out like drug tests. When I was a janitor, any kind of workplace accident, let's say I slipped and fell. Fortunately, it never happened. But fortunately, if it had, next day that I came into work, somebody would have handed me a cup.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is that's ridiculous in the state that it's legal. I mean, it's like, are you going to tell me that we have to work this horrible, horrendous job where 4 hours a day makes me feel like I've, like, died and then came back and then someone hit me and then I died again, and I'm not supposed to have some sort of method of... And then, like, healthcare is inaccessible because our job is...
I mean, like, not even weed. They could just say, oh, like, we thought you were drunk, or we thought it was something else.
Right.
Painkillers. Like, I was a janitor on a military base, so it was federal jurisdiction. It means they don't have to care what's legal in Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's, it's just, it's horrific. I think it's so funny now that I'm thinking back on it that they have us mop the floors as everyone's panicking at 1 p.m. trying to get coffee.
The most insane shit. Like, why are we mopping the floor at 11 a.m.?
Right. No, it's atrocious.
I don't get it.
It seems like some layer of hell. I'm like, in this layer of hell, you have to walk really fast, but everyone just mopped the floor.
At my store, the Fred Meyer in Tumwater, there's a couple of departments who aren't union yet, but are trying to unionize, and part of their captive audience thing was like, well, you needed unions in the 1800s, but not anymore because there's federal laws to protect you or whatever. And it's like, how do you think we got to where there was any workplace safety regulation? And they try to gut enforcing it, obviously, but...
I mean, as if they wouldn't be hiring 12-year-olds if there weren't a law against it.
Exactly.
Right. They're like, they're mature enough. But also...
Right.
they don't require non-slip shoes. So they don't require this. And so you're supposed to, they're like, oh, you get 20% off at Skechers. And it's like sometimes, you don't always get 20% off at Skechers or whatever. But they'll tell you that, and they're like, their non-slip shoes are recommended, and so it's like they don't have to actually, if something's required in the dress code, then there's like a assumption that they're gonna help provide it, and so it's like they're like it's recommended, but you're gonna barely make enough to make rent. You're probably gonna need 7 roommates. Try to get non-slip shoes on top of that.
And I mean, I keep thinking about the big picture of all of this, and like, our bodies, especially those of us who are low-wage workers, our bodies are capital, and it's literally the only thing we have to sell. And I remember I worked at Amazon briefly, and they would pay for your shoes, and they would pay for, like, your PPE. But if and when you got injured on the job, because you always do, it's Amazon, it is where devils go to die. And so many times I'd be like, hey, I can't do this work today or this week because literally my shoulder is fucked up, or I can't bend over without being in extreme pain. And they're like,
there was that, wasn't there some like article that's like Amazon is nervous that it's not going to be able to have enough like employable people at the rate that they're losing people.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
they're literally just chewing through the workforce of the country.
It's like now we're all literally disabled.
Unable to work.
Yeah, to put it in more of a Marxist jargony term, what Billy is talking about is called proletarianization, where you take somebody and you just reduce them to the state where all they have is their labor to sell. Mm-hmm. So just for a $10 word there.
Well, the Marx quote I thought of was the one about was the one about like capitalism depletes the 2 sources of its wealth, the soil and the worker. Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, well, actually, since I
quarter in the jar for Marxist jargon.
So Billy, I was curious. You mentioned something earlier about you mentioned somebody as the sad boss, and previously at Strike Action Second, you talked about like the idea of the good boss, the bad boss, and the sad boss. Could you just explain like what is that?
So, good boss could go either way. You'll have a good boss who is pro-union. I would even say that our district manager is good boss in the sense that he is pro-union in a way. He's gone out of his way to indicate to us that he is a socialist and that he is just reading off of a script.
I mean, I would dare to say that's not necessarily even part of the narrative that they, with the good boss, bad boss.
Yeah. Okay, so
there's a actually good boss.
Like an actual truly good boss is one who is pro-union. So I don't even think that kind of boss would even qualify in this like constructs. You have the good boss that is like, I'm so great and I'm so nice and I'm so empathetic and I have created a great vibe at my store. There's a community here. We're a family here. We have parties all the time. There's always snacks in the back. We have decorations everywhere. This place feels like home to my partners.
Why would you want to unionize?
Why would you want to unionize? And it's actually a really good tactic. It's really a powerful tool because we've seen it in our district trying to encourage another location to organize at their store. And they say, well, we love it here. Our boss is so great. Like, it feels like a family here. We're fine. And it's a really, like, hats off to that store manager, good boss, because she is
nice enough that they don't recognize that they don't have good benefits, they don't have like good hours, they don't have good wages, they don't have
the vibe is good enough where they don't.
I think that's the peak
complain.
of what they can get.
Mm-hmm. Or they've engendered enough loyalty by their subordinates that the subordinates are too afraid to do any kind of direct action because they don't want to hurt good boss.
Yeah.
Because they see the good boss, they don't see Starbucks.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or they can very easily separate the things that Howard Schultz says and who Howard Schultz is. Train wreck of a man. But our boss isn't like that. Like, our store manager doesn't treat us.
No puppet strings can be seen.
Yeah. She doesn't talk to us the way that Howard Schultz talks to the public. She's nice and good to us. Then there's sad boss. And that's been our experience. Just very weepy and internalizes our action and thinks that it's a personal attack and feels very scared about this change. It's like, why are things changing? And what did I do to deserve this? I'm going to get in a whole lot of trouble. Whew. And just trying to guilt us into not speaking up for ourselves. And like, why would you do this?
Still doesn't feel inherently bad, but like...
Yeah. It's like a way to...
manipulate.
Yeah, definitely manipulate our emotions. And I would say, what's that word?
Gaslight?
No. Like, appeal to our empathy. And then you have Bad Boss.
Bad Boss is going to be the one who writes you up when you start unionizing. Like, goes about, like, creating a negative space to sort of make you feel like you did something wrong.
Will go out of their way to take down pro-union propaganda. I've seen videos of people's managers going out of their way to take posters down, like pro-union posters.
Which we're allowed to have up.
Take them off the community board and go to the dumpster and toss them away. Or
go to the dumpster specifically because they're too easy to access from the trash can.
You know? Bad Boss will, like...
Cut hours,
discourage outside of work talk on the floor. Like, which is why all of these things are, like, ULPs or unfair labor practices and tampering with laboratory conditions, because... First of all, if you and your store has had this, like, culture of, we talk about all kinds of shit on the floor. We talk about what we did over the weekend. We talk about shows we watch. We talk about everything.
Might even slip in a curse word or two. And it's fine. And then all of a sudden it's, no cursing. I'm writing you up for cursing. Or don't talk about outside of work stuff. Sometimes they'll take away your headset so you can't talk to people.
They will say, give up your headset because you're talking too much. About stuff.
You're not allowed, and like there's stuff that's even written into like our sort of guidelines, our handbook, that is like you're not allowed to have like strong outside of work relationships. So like with your partners, and partners is such a funny word to use. At Starbucks we call our coworkers our partners. And so they kind of have in there that if you have a relationship with like another partner outside of work that is very strong, it could lead to like the workplace having kind of special circumstances, I guess. And so they're like, well, if you're friends outside of work, then maybe you'll allow them to have more bad behavior, or you won't. I don't know, you know, it's like this weird kind of like, if you're friends, then like what'll happen, you know, maybe you'll try to start treating people special and like making other people feel outcasted, or, you know, stuff like that. They'll find all sorts of reasons to like say that you can't have outside of work relationships, which obviously doesn't work. And then they also have another one where you can't have group chats outside of work. You can't have like whole store group chats, which is like very obviously anti-union. And
you start talking.
I mean, also you're starting to get into like, this is just blatant First Amendment violation of like freedom of speech and freedom of assembly.
Yeah. They're just an expectation that you'll subordinate every aspect of your life to this job. Is
the cult of Starbucks.
Bizarre, yeah.
It's funny too though, because it's like, it's things that you wouldn't think of being a rule unless you, because like I spent a day kind of like going through the handbooks and like communications part of it, and like finding things that I was like, well, now I'm concerned that I'm going to get written up for whatever. And so I went through and like kind of checked myself off and like saying things that would matter and pertain to me. And I saw that and I was like, oh shit, you know, and I was like, this is deeper than I thought it was.
Yeah,
like they could write you up for whatever, really.
Write you up for
fraternizing too much outside of work.
Literally just, and you know, we've come across that. Had an anti-union person at our store accuse us of being cliquey, but we were literally organizing, and it became an issue.
Well, and I kind of got hired on Billie's reference because we were friends from before.
Yeah.
And so it's like having the expectations that we can't be like close.
Because if they don't even want you to talk about your wages with your coworkers, why would they want you to be close personal friends with your coworkers? Because then you're really going to be honest and talk about that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then you'll start a union.
Then you'll start a union. Can't have that.
No.
Don't unionize. You're so sexy.
So how do you feel about the response from the community towards your union campaign? Are there any groups that were really helpful, or were there any that like really weren't as supportive as you hoped they would be?
Well, I mean, not to like shout out anyone, but the DSA has been very helpful. The DSA. Yeah, if you're working to unionize, contact your local DSA. They're definitely going to help you through it. And like, we've gotten a lot of support from them. They like helped us we got all sorts of utilities for helping us with our strikes, for helping us with rallies. There's also like, it's so weird, the community members that we found that were like super gung-ho about it. We have this one customer who I want to shout out, but I won't. And she always comes through and she wears her little union button and she always orders her drink and then she goes, "Union strong!" And it's so sweet. And
every day.
Like, nice. She's come and there was, I think 2 separate occasions on both of our strikes that she came, and on the first one I know for sure she sat in our drive-thru to make sure no one came through our drive-thru. I also reached out to the local Evergreen, our local college, and I looked at a couple classes that were doing like business studies or like, kind of political studies, and reached out to like some of the teachers in the classes, the professors, and talked to them about it. And so I got to be a part of like a Zoom call with a bunch of students and kind of talked about what unions look like, and like got a lot of support that way. I think it was also really beneficial to the students because it's good to see that kind of stuff in action. And then a teachers union came in and helped us out. We had some people who were involved with like healthcare, like getting more accessible healthcare and stuff. So it's been like, it's really funny because just out of the blue we'll be like doing something and someone will come up and they'll be like, "Hey, I love what you're doing, and I work with like a teachers union, and iron workers union. I'm trying to get a bill passed that has to do with accessible healthcare. I'm trying to do this, that, or the other." And it'll be like people just kind of organically all come together, and it's so funny being part of the union movement. Because I told my brother, I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're unionizing, it's crazy," and he goes, "Oh my god, really?" And he pulls out all this paperwork and he's like, "I'm part of an iron workers union," and he like gives me all of his contracts and stuff like that, and he's like, "This is really important," and he just like. It was super sweet because ever since then, it's like we had some Teamsters show up to our rally in Portland, and they were like so gung-ho about all of it. And there was the...
Crazy Grandmas?
What are they called? Yeah. The
wild...
The something grannies.
The Raging Grannies.
Raging Grannies, yeah. And they're so sweet. And it's like, it's so funny because people just really organically just kind of appear into the scene, and they're like... I don't know, there's something really special about being a part of a union. You're really nestled safely in like a situation where people understand how special it is to be workers. And I think it was also funny when we saw the Teamsters, there was one of them who was like talking about how drippy our outfits were and stuff, because I had pressed on a union label onto the back of one of my friend's jackets, and they're wearing like, it was so funny to see people wearing Timbs and Carhartts in like a very union way, where it's like back home in South Dakota, you'd see someone wearing like their fancy cowboy boots that are like still work boots, but they're the ones that they don't work in, Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I don't know, just recognizing that someone's wearing new Carhartts, not like already torn up Carhartts, that make them look like they're blue collar worker, but genuine blue collar workers having their like blue collar get up and like wearing it in this like very specific way. It's such a crazy community.
I was also wondering, like, just after like having this conversation, like, how having a union is like, how has this changed your relationships, like with your your coworkers? Of like, you've been through something now for it's like what, 4 or 5 months, and have those relationships like changed? Like, I guess it's brought you closer together, maybe, or something.
There have been like instances where, I mean, it's a complicated thing because alongside the whole unionizing thing, it's like we were the first sort of strike in the Pacific Northwest. And so there's like a lot of, there's a lot of popularity, I guess, around the movement, especially because we're like unionizing the service industry, which was considered like impossible. And so there at times has been like this sort of, I don't want to say resentment, but there's been times where it's like, it's hard to be so involved in such like a public way without sort of having this like weird feeling of superiority, I guess. And like also with unionizing, there's no leaders, there's no one that's like in charge of it. Like, it's not that pyramid that people understand the world to be. It's like anyone who wants to be involved in this is involved in it. And I think it's a really foreign concept for a lot of people to understand, that it's like, I'm not your boss. Like, I may have done like this action, but that doesn't make me your boss. Like, you get to decide what you do and how you're involved, and like you can be as involved as you want to be or as not involved as you want to be. And I think that has created like, I wouldn't say animosity, but it's created like this whole confusion where people are like, oh well, I can just do whatever. I'm like, yeah, you can do whatever.
It's about, I think, in like looking at how the Pacific Northwest has done a spectacular job at establishing a very solid regional organizing committee. We didn't ask Buffalo for permission.
Right.
We looked at their example and continue to consult with people because they've been through this and they're currently bargaining. And it's like, well, how's it going for you? I mean, Michelle sits in on our bargaining meetings, and Michelle from the Elmwood store, I think, and she gives us pointers on like, they're probably going to do this and they're probably going to do that. But in no way has anyone from Buffalo been like, you can't sit with us, or we started this and we are in charge. They have the resources, and because we are all comrades, we've been able to reach out and access those resources and then kind of build on it, because what we're wanting is some kind of national structure at some point. Mm-hmm. And in order for that to happen, no gods, no masters. There are no bosses here. And I think what makes really successful organizers is people who recognize their own strengths and want to be used and have the...
I'm going to say je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. Have the gumption and like the desire to do it, and the initiative. That's the word. The initiative to do it and not...
I think...
ask anybody. Like,
a lot of people feel really liberated.
Yeah.
I think we have created a community in the way that people come to work, and it's like, I guess you don't come to work with that same mentality of where you're like, oh, another day, another dollar, I get. Another day, another like 25 cents. Mm-hmm. You know, now people come into work and they're like, oh my God, did you hear about that thing that happened over there where they like did this crazy thing? Or like what are we doing in terms of striking? Like, how are things looking? And it's like, it's opened up really the discussion for people to just be very transparent in how they feel as workers in America in late stage capitalism. We've always had this community, but it opens up the door to talk about, it's like things that are considered taboo, you know, suddenly we can talk about it. Yeah.
And then not to be all kumbaya, but like, this experience has definitely brought us closer. I am closer to people that I work with that I never thought I would be before. Getting to know people in bigger ways. I have been experiencing homelessness, and I don't think that if we had unionized, if we hadn't unionized, I probably wouldn't be homeless because I had to quit my job so that I could do this full time. Aside from that, I don't think that if I had started to build this community that I would have had the support system that I have now.
Building from that, how has organizing a union changed your outlook on politics and society more generally?
I don't think we've experienced too big of a... I guess there are parts of it where it's like, I guess I learned more, where it's like, I learned that our union has a basis in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. That's the Lady Garment Workers Union, and we actually, Workers United is stemmed from that, which is like, I've learned a lot more about like history and I guess like understanding. It's so funny because I learned about that fire, that like really intense tragedy in high school, you know, and I didn't know it was attached to like unions. I was always kind of taught like the Teamster version of unions, where it's like, not that Teamsters are bad, but like Jimmy Hoffa was a crazy thing. And so it's like you learn about unions in this way where it's like, we don't owe anything to unions, you know, unions have a lot to do with like scoundrels, you know, and then you like kind of get involved in it and you're like, holy shit, like we don't have children working in factories anymore. We have like 8-hour days, we have 5 days a week, we have like all of these rights, we have like PPE, we have safety precautions, we have emergency exits, we have OSHA, we have like all sorts of like
compliance.
Yeah, we have
breaks.
Mandatory 5 hours you have to have a lunch, or otherwise like, you know, the business has to deal with paying you time and a half or getting a $10,000 fine if they don't do compliance. And so there's like all sorts of things that we don't recognize are parts of unions. And so I guess in a way it's like, yeah, it has opened my eyes to like recognizing and actually like I guess, thinking a little harder about things that I just accept as normal circumstances. You know, I'm like, oh, well, I didn't get to work at 12 years old or 9 years old or whatever. I have, some rights. Not as many as we should have, but some.
We're so conditioned in this country to think that, like, well, if anything good is going to happen, it's going to be, like, delivered from on high, right? And then when you become involved in the labor movement, you realize that pretty much every time any improvement happened in society, it was because regular people organized and did something about it because they weren't going to take it anymore. Like,
well, even we learned about how it's so funny because we had these like canvassing meeting sort of things where our representative, he told us about how there's these like legalities when it comes to unionizing where it's like railroad workers can't unionize. And so you find out why they can't unionize is because they can pretty successfully put the country to a halt. And it's like there's certain levels to which people can't unionize. And it's like, what are the other ones?
I think with railroad workers, it's that they're not allowed to strike. Because there are railroad unions, but there's like all these weird legal things preventing them from striking.
Sorry. Yeah. And there's also, there's some workers that can't unionize, isn't there? It's like there's like some clauses that you're just like, why was that put in there? And then there's like the history too. There's also
like public sector workers didn't have the right to unionize until like the 70s. That was
60s.
I'm bringing up the phone.
Ah, crap. Well,
but there's like these crazy clauses around all of these rights that we have, or that we at least think that we have, and you find out the history behind them. And it's like railroad workers can't strike because it puts a halt to production in like a very serious way. And yeah, it's like the country's like, okay, well, we can allow some things, but not other. I don't know. I guess it's crazy to find out the history behind all these things.
It was 1962. President Kennedy signed Executive Order 10988 in 1962, so that permitted federal workers to unionize.
My bad.
I think that Nora mentioned it earlier, like realizing that I would say that we have kind of in the last 5 or 10 years have coined this phrase, and we hear it all the time. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Mm-hmm. And we've been using that term as a way to mitigate our guilt for not doing as much as we could for the environment, or to like lessen our impact on like the environment, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like, at least in my head, and I would probably say in a lot of like in my circles, like you start to internalize that in such a way where you think, well, let's just put the impetus on corporations so I don't have to do anything. Because yeah, why am I feeling guilty about taking 15-minute showers? Why am I feeling guilty about using straws? Why am I feeling guilty about buying fast fashion? I am poor. So the impetus should be on corporations, but with that like thinking and that mentality, I think that you could become a little bit more complacent and think, well, I'm just one person, so does it matter? Like, not that these things aren't important to me, but what can I do by myself?
Which, like, speaks to scabbing and speaks to crossing picket lines to, like, consume different types of brands. It's, like, those are the type of things where it is really important to, like, know where you're putting your money and know, like, if you have like, sympathy for your other workers, then you wouldn't go and work for a corporation who just fired a bunch of their workers. And it's like as illegal as those things, as illegal as it is to fire people for unionizing, companies do that stuff, and companies have all the money in the world to do that stuff. And our complacency in those situations is important. Like you can't I don't know, you can't scab. You can't go and buy Kellogg's when Kellogg's is striking. Just making sure that you do recognize where you do like throw your weight. Power. Right.
Yeah. And this is like, we talk about it all the time and we always say it. It's why, they don't let railroad workers strike. It's because our biggest weapon continues to be halting production. It's the only thing that makes corporations hear us. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, we've seen it, like just one person being like, we should go on strike.
Mm-hmm. And to clarify, anyone can unionize. There are people who can't strike, and there are strikes that you can't do. So you can't do a sit-down strike, you can't do a wildcat strike, and you can't do...
Sympathy strikes.
Yeah, sympathy strikes.
Yeah, so like one person being like, we should strike, getting, like, talking about it, and then gathering that support. That's like, well, look what you just did. Your whole store just went on strike. just because you mentioned it and you just had that feeling, and then you let it build. And
it's funny because I think we've had 2 strikes so far, and our second strike,
kind of 3. I'm gonna say we've had 3 because it's Olympia. And
okay, Olympia's had 3 strikes so far, and it's kind of, I guess it's getting a little humorous because as much work as striking is, it is one of those weird things that you can throw together last minute.
Kind of. I mean, your hair will fall out, your teeth will fall out, your skin will get dry. No? Okay.
Shut up.
Isolated event.
It's a little bit stressful, but at the end of the day, I feel like unionizing is one of those things where it's like open arms. Like, you get to learn a lot. People are happy that, like, I don't know, it's such a... I've never met so many people be so excited about something, just like on the streets. It's like people will be like, "Oh, you work at Starbucks?" I was with one of our friends and we were waiting in her driveway, and her neighbor comes out and he goes, "I don't know if I should say hi to you or get your autograph," because like she's been in so many like interviews on TV. We just had a few like national things go out, and so it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things where you don't expect it to be as intense and as crazy and as like passionate and as like, it's such a like. Unionizing is just by practice one of the most empathetic things that you can do, because it's like I can say that childcare doesn't affect me because I don't have any children, but I care about it because I have coworkers and friends who have children, and so it's like
that truly, like we've said this before, like we use that term solidarity all the time, but taking the time to pause and think about what that actually means is, an injury to one is an injury to all. I don't have kids, but the fact that my best friend can't afford childcare or has to pay $630 a month for healthcare, that's me.
Like, I have 5 roommates, and also one of my best friends is homeless. Is like, I inherently, like, how do I not care?
Yeah, if a 5-year partner isn't getting that seniority pay, that affects me, and which is why we went on strike these last 2 times. Is we're not getting fired in Olympia, but if one of my comrades in Eugene, Oregon, of all places, is getting fired for organizing, that affects me, and so I'm not gonna hesitate to stand up and like make sure that this company realizes and acknowledges just how essential we actually are. They called us essential during this extinction event. And now we're actually acting like we are. Like, okay,
if you need your coffee to start your day, then I need my rights to live a quality of life.
Period.
But yeah, you touched on that paradox of like, yeah, there's only so much that an individual can do, and like they want you to keep thinking of yourself as an isolated individual. But like a lot of individuals organized together can actually change things.
The more you put the burden of responsibility on the individual, the less there is for any system or power structure to respond to changes. Because like, oh, it's just you. You just need to minimize your consumption. You just need to do your thing. It's like, well, yeah, there's a balance of that, but it's also like, we're all there's a balance to be found there.
Well, see, and it's so funny because I think being like a person of color, I'm always like, there's no culture in America, and then I'm like, cut this if you need to. But then, like, I hear about, like, I, like, learn more about unionizing. I'm like, holy shit, this is, like, I mean, it's not solely American, but it's a very American movement, It's, like, it has really intense roots for, like, Americans in America. It's, like, once again, the triangle shirtwaist fire. It's, like, things that happened, that, Jimmy Hoffa, I'm sorry. Things that happened in America that are, like, oh, my God.
I mean,
it's almost kind of bittersweet in a way, because it's, like, yeah, unionizing is kind of an American thing in a sense that this country is this country is so good at denying us our rights, but this country is also so good about knowing their rights and fighting for them.
It's funny you mentioned you're talking about like the labor history. It's like I live in Seattle now, but 100 years ago, it was often referred to as the Soviet of Seattle because Seattle was such a bastion of left-wing politics that, it's known for the 1919 general strike, whereas now it's people associated with like Amazon and, Amazon and Microsoft. But it was like, well, no, Seattle used to be a very different town politically. And Nora, you were talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, of like, how the Workers United got started. To do like a podcast for, there's actually an episode on the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire done by like the Behind the Bastards podcast that I recommend people listen to, because it's a good like hour plus of just going into, oh yeah, like not just this was an awful incident, but how workplace conditions generated by the employer directly led to that tragedy.
Right. No.
And like cost cutting measures of like, oh, where materials were stored in a very granular sense.
Right. Well, and it's like locking the doors so that people couldn't go on breaks, making no emergency exits so people couldn't leave. And like the fact that, what is it, like 20 something in the high 20s, people jumped out the windows, because imagine how tragic it is to die in the very place that imprisoned you. Right. And so I think that's a lot of people could identify with, like, I would rather jump to my own death, commit suicide, than die somewhere that has given me no rights and has locked me in like my own kind of personal hell. And yeah, no, it's like, it is crazy because it's like, in a weird way, it's magical to be like, at one time our union rep had said, this is your history. This happened to you. And it was like sitting there and like in this room with a bunch of people who just like unionize their store or work on unionizing their stores. And you're like, holy shit, you know, like this is also going to be someone's history in the future. Like this is going to be something, I mean, like I am proud to talk about, not like, it's not something that brings me joy, but it's like, I'm proud to say that the ladies workers garment, you know, all of the words. I'm happy to say that like these people drove us to this point in our lives and to this point in history. And I am proud to be a part of what's happening right now, and to hopefully be someone that, I mean, to be a part of a movement that's talked about in the future. You know, this is like, it's a huge deal. And I think that it's just so exciting. It's liberating.
Completely. We have kind of struck gold because, again, to circle back, nobody, and actually our representative, before he got this assignment, you know, it had been talked about that Starbucks is never going to unionize. You can use Starbucks, high turnover, you know, low pay. Like, the reasons that people want to unionize are why it is so difficult to unionize is because I'm not getting, like, I have to get a second job if I want to keep working here or if I want to pay my bills. And then some people just be like, it's not worth it. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then so those people aren't staying around long enough to organize. But somehow at this like moment in history, and it's probably not a mystery at all. I mean, with very specific set of circumstances, extinction event, where we are in relation to climate change, where we are as far as who is running this country and who was running the country. People are tired. And so it does feel like striking gold in the sense that we are on a momentum, and in a sense that makes it feel easier to keep going, because this is an extremely publicized campaign and one that is a little bit unprecedented. But like my goal, my hope, I think, would be for people who are not working at Starbucks to, because obviously what we want every Starbucks, all 9,000 stores to be unionized. But what I want more than that is for people who don't work at Starbucks to build that momentum in their own industries and in their own workplaces, because it is relatively easy to do this.
Well, also imagine like a baristas union.
Yeah, like just baristas as a whole, like Panera Bread.
A bread
Chipotle.
union.
Just every industry, every workplace to build that momentum, because it feels very easy now. Because we have a national TikTok, we got a national Instagram, we got a national Twitter, we got fun dances and merch, and so it feels easier because we have so much support and so much attention. But I don't want that to like
everything my mom couldn't give me.
Exactly. So much support and attention. Thanks. I don't want people who don't work at Starbucks to think, well, we can't do that because we don't have the same momentum or the same publicity. I think it's possible regardless. And you can create that, because we do live in a very specific point in history which we have access to too much internet. So if you want to organize your workplace, start a hashtag.
Speaking of which, other than starting a hashtag, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about unionizing their store like right now?
Or their workplace generally.
You're not an island. You cannot do it by yourself. You will not do it by yourself. You need at least...
You should not.
You should not do it by yourself. For starters, you need 30% of your store to prove to or give evidence to the labor board that there is interest at your workplace. So it might sound slimy, but start cultivating relationships at work. Start talking to people just about any old thing, really. And then eventually, it is as easy as complaining. That's how you start a union. Start complaining openly and being like, "Damn, that's crazy. Wait, you get paid $17?"
Also, like, reach out to, if you're working at Starbucks per se. I had someone recently reach out to me on my personal Instagram and be like, "Hey, I'm from Ohio. I want to unionize my store, and like, how do I do that?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, reach out to Workers United." It's like, if you can find a way to get in contact with like the people who are at a store that's unionizing, the unions that are like in unionizing these stores, like connecting with people and creating systems of communication that are easy to follow up with is one of the easiest things to do. You can get in contact with, like, we have a customer who was just very pro-union from the jump. He was like, "When are you guys going to unionize?" Like, when are you guys? And like, before even unionizing, he was like, "What's going on? Are you guys going to unionize? Are you thinking about it?" And so it's like people like that, they're going to get you involved with the community. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to know how to do these things. It's like making yourself kind of a web for anything that you can consume in terms of like unionizing will automatically kind of put you in that place.
Yeah, that's one that I struggle with a little bit, is just the, like, you have to talk to people. Like, I'm not the most outgoing person by nature, like, normally, and I have to kind of, like, make myself, it's like, you gotta, like, get people to, tell you about their lives, because then they're gonna tell you about what's wrong with work and how, the boss is putting the screws to them, and it's like, yeah, and it feels a little, like, but at the same time, it's like, it's in everyone's interest that we all talk to each other about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, using things like, we have Discord. And so I'm not good at using the electronics. My grandma had to call me and teach me how to use my Wells Fargo app over the phone. Sorry, I don't like Wells Fargo, but anyways. And so it's funny because it's like you can find your way that, like, I feel like everyone has their own specific way. For me, it was reaching out to, like, people. Like, it's easy for me to talk to people. But, like, I have friends who are, like, really good at using Discord. And, like, they, it'd be easier for them to just, like, be online and doing things. I have friends that are, like, better at social media. There's people that are, like, good at, like, designing things. And so it's, like, you kind of find your niche. And, like, within that, there are going to be other people. Like, it's just, like, how that works. Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, it's, like, you can figure out how to do it through social media. You can figure out how to do it through your neighbors. You can figure out how to do it through your friends. There's all sorts of different ways to get to, I feel like, the same point. Even like through research, it's like maybe you like researching, you just found interest in unions, and then you go down the like wormhole and figure it all out. If you commit to it, it's gonna naturally come to you.
Yeah, because really what has made this campaign so successful is having people at the helm who have follow through and commit to their obligations, because that is what made it so difficult, I think, for the service industry, because of that high turnover. It's like, well, I'm out of here anyway. Trying not to say, well, I'm on the move anyway, so this isn't that important to me. Having that stick-to-itiveness. I just made that word up.
Recognizing your own importance and like your own value.
Acknowledging how much value and power you actually have, and then disciplining yourself to make those things happen. And that's how you create a successful union campaign. 3 easy steps.
DIY your own union.
Truly. Yeah.
So with all that said, what's next for both of you?
You got a lot going on, sister.
Shut up.
Oh.
I do this full time. That is the goal. I'm a first-time activist. I grew up extremely conservatively. If you had asked me when I got hired at Starbucks, hey, you gonna be a rebel rouser after this? Or what if I told you today, when you get hired at Starbucks, you're gonna become a socialist, a radical socialist? I would not believe you. So, like, this has happened to me personally in a really special time, because, like, I get to be outspoken and assertive for once ever in my life, and I get to fight for things that I care about, which was extremely forbidden for a really long time. And so being in a place where, like, I discovered, hey, I really like organizing for people's rights, because it doesn't just stop with workers' rights. It is human rights. It is reproductive rights. It is climate change. It is uplifting marginalized people. It is ending wealth inequality. And so do this full time, all the time, just moving away from individualism to more collectivism as we head straight to the apocalypse.
Into the sun. Oh.
Literally into the sun. We're headed straight for an apocalypse.
I feel like I'm just like, it's so funny because this whole time it's been like, I'm just happy to be here. I'm like, I feel like I'd like to like be, I don't think I could ever go back to like not being part of like union culture. I don't like, I think it speaks to everyone in its own specific way, but like for me, there's like the community, I'll never get over like feeling like I watched someone drunkenly sing this Solidarity Forever song.
What a time.
And yeah, I don't think you can ever go back from that. I think I both loved it and I'm scarred. And yeah, I think that, I mean, from here, I'm just happy to be part of this. I'm going to continue being involved in the ways that I can, but always leaving space for myself and leaving a lot of it up to like every opportunity I get.
I think a goal for both of us, and I speak for our third person who is not here, who has been with us every step of the way since day one, is giving other people the same resources that we got so that they too can feel empowered and experience this hell of a time. I don't want this to just be a thing that we're experiencing, and I don't want this to just be an Olympia thing or a Starbucks thing. I want other people to experience the very real high that you get from putting on direct action, like hosting a strike, having demonstrations, like organizing this. Like there's nothing like it, and I want other people to be able to experience it as well.
Well, it sounds like we're coming up on the end of things. We've been talking for about an hour and a half now, and just wanted to thank both of you for coming.
Thank you.
Being available, and also for the end of the podcast. We should probably put on the Solidarity Forever.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I think we have
It's
to.
a good note to end this on.
Get the Pete Seeger version.
Yes.
Well, if we do it, you gotta point your toe.
Already pointed.
Okay.
All right, and thank you everyone for listening, and hope you'll join us again next time.
Magnified 1,000-fold, we can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong.